You're standing in the airport, doing exactly what you've done for decades. You arrive early, you read the signs carefully, you wait your turn, and yet, something feels off. A stranger offers to help. A small service suddenly costs far more than expected. A decision you didn't even realize you made is already charged to your card. Here's the uncomfortable truth most travelers never hear. Many airport scams don't look like scams at all, and senior travelers are watched more closely than anyone else. Not because you're careless, but because you're calm, polite, and predictable. And once you understand how this works, you'll never walk through an airport the same way again. Most people imagine airport scams as something obvious: fake uniforms, stolen wallets, or aggressive trickery. But that's not how it usually happens anymore. Modern airports are designed to look clean, official, and controlled. Almost everything around you feels legitimate, and that's exactly why these scams work so well. What many travelers don't realize is that airports today are built around speed and revenue. Every delay is a problem, every pause is an opportunity, and every moment of uncertainty becomes a chance for someone else to step in. Senior travelers, especially those over 50, often move more carefully. You read signs, you double-check information, you ask when you're unsure. None of that is wrong. But in a system optimized for fast-moving crowds, it makes you stand out. And when you stand out, you become easier to approach, easier to redirect, easier to upsell, easier to charge small fees that quietly add up. The key detail most people miss is this: these situations aren't random, they're repeatable, and they happen because the system allows them to. So, what exactly is driving this, and who benefits when you hesitate? The first thing to understand is this: no one at the airport is guessing. People who approach travelers, whether they're offering help, services, or solutions, are trained to observe behavior, not age alone. And certain behaviors stand out immediately. You pause instead of walking straight through. You scan the departure board more than once. You keep documents in your hand rather than your pocket. You hesitate before answering or deciding. None of these actions are mistakes. They're normal signs of careful travel. But in a crowded, time-driven environment, they quietly mark you as someone who can be interrupted without resistance. Senior travelers are also far less likely to shut down an interaction quickly. You're polite, you listen, you don't want to be rude, and that extra 30 seconds is often all someone needs. What makes this uncomfortable is that many of these interactions begin in places that feel safe, near official counters, boarding gates, or information desks. Nothing feels illegal, nothing feels urgent, and that's exactly the point. By the time you realize a choice was made, the moment to avoid it has already passed. One of the most uncomfortable realities about airport scams is that many of them are completely legal. Currency exchange counters display official logos. Wi-Fi kiosks promise fast access. Last-minute upgrades are presented as helpful options. Assistance services wear badges and stand where authority feels real. Nothing about these services violates the rules. What they violate is clarity. Prices are often broken into pieces. Fees appear after the transaction starts. Time pressure replaces explanation. Senior travelers are especially vulnerable here because you tend to trust systems that look organized and professional. You assume that if something is offered inside an airport, it must be fair. But airports operate on partnerships, commissions, and volume, not traveler outcomes. This is where hesitation becomes expensive. When you're tired, rushing to board, or unsure of the language, small yes decisions stack up quickly. A service you thought would cost a few dollars suddenly becomes a triple-digit charge. And because you technically agreed, there's rarely a clear path to reverse it. The system doesn't need to trick you. It only needs you to decide before you're ready. Not every airport scam is about money up front. Some are about pressure, applied quietly through behavior. At boarding gates, counters, and service desks, your reactions are being read constantly. How fast you respond, whether you question a statement, how willing you are to push back. Senior travelers are often more cooperative. You don't want to slow the line, you don't want to argue. You assume the person in front of you knows something you don't. That creates a subtle imbalance. You may be told your bag is borderline. Your seat might need to change. Your boarding order is flexible. None of these statements are lies, but they're designed to see how much resistance they'll get. When you nod, pause, or ask for clarification instead of setting a boundary, the system moves forward without you. Decisions get made on your behalf. Fees get applied, options disappear. What's most troubling is that these moments feel personal, when in reality, they're procedural. The airport isn't reacting to who you are. It's reacting to how you behave under pressure. And once you understand that, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Two travelers can walk through the same airport, follow the same signs, and break no rules, yet walk away with very different outcomes. One moves with confidence. They know where not to stop. They decline services without explanation. They don't engage when the decision isn't necessary. The other hesitates. They listen. They trust that asking a question will lead to clarity. Only one of them pays extra. What makes this especially frustrating for senior travelers is that the cost isn't always obvious. It might be a currency exchange rate that's quietly inflated, a service fee buried in a receipt, a boarding decision that limits your options later. Over time, these moments add up, not just financially, but emotionally. Each negative experience chips away at your confidence. Airports start to feel stressful. Decisions feel heavier. Travel becomes something to endure rather than enjoy. And that's the real cost. When you begin to feel uncertain in spaces that once felt familiar, you give up control without realizing it. So if the system isn't going to slow down for you, how do you move through it without being pulled into these traps? Avoiding these airport traps doesn't require confrontation. It doesn't require speed. And it certainly doesn't require changing who you are. What it does require is adjusting when you engage and when you don't. The most effective shift senior travelers can make is learning to delay decisions. If a service isn't essential in that moment, it doesn't need an answer. A calm, "not right now," is often enough to end the interaction without friction. Preparation matters as well. When you already know where the common pressure points are, exchange counters, boarding gates, Wi-Fi kiosks, assistance desks, you're less likely to be caught off guard. Awareness removes urgency. Equally important is understanding that silence can be protective. You don't owe explanations. You don't need to justify a refusal. The shorter your response, the less room there is for pressure to build. Looking ahead, airports will continue to automate, monetize, and streamline. That won't change. What can change is how confidently you move through that system. Knowledge doesn't make travel complicated. It makes it calmer. Most airport scams don't rely on deception. They rely on hesitation, politeness, and pressure, especially when time feels tight. Senior travelers aren't targeted because they're unaware. They're targeted because they're respectful and careful. Once you recognize that pattern, you can move through airports with confidence again, without stress, without confrontation, and without unnecessary costs. If this felt familiar, share it with someone who travels the same way you do. And subscribe to stay informed about the quiet rules airports never explain.